She let another man put his hand on her waist. People laughed like I was invisible, and everyone thought I was weak. They were wrong. They just didn't know it yet. Before we go any further, if you enjoy stories where silence hits harder than shouting, where dignity beats chaos, hit subscribe, tap like, and leave a comment. It tells me you're still here, and this one, you'll want to stay. The company gala was supposed to be harmless, one of those polished evenings with soft jazz, overpriced wine, and people pretending they cared about each other's lives. My wife, Laura, had talked about it for weeks, said it mattered, said showing up together mattered, said it could change things for her. I believed her. That was my first mistake. We arrived at the downtown hotel just after 7. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, men in tailored suits shaking hands like they were sealing secret deals. Women in elegant dresses smiling with eyes that calculated everything. Laura looked stunning. Black dress, hair pulled back just enough to look effortless. I remember thinking how proud I was to stand beside her. I should have noticed how quickly she drifted away. I grabbed us drinks from the bar, nodding through small talk with people whose names I'd forget before the ice melted. That's when I heard her laugh. Not her real laugh, the one she used at home when something genuinely amused her. This one was polished, controlled, the kind you use when you're performing. I turned. She was standing with Richard, her boss. I'd heard that name more times than I could count, always followed by pauses, careful wording, half-finished sentences. He stood too close, too comfortable. His hand rested at her lower back like it belonged there. People around them smiled, watched. Some raised eyebrows, some smirked. Then he slid his hand to her waist and pulled her in just slightly, enough to make a statement. "She's my +1 tonight," he said, loud enough for the group, and for me. Laughter followed. Not loud, not cruel, worse, casual. Laura didn't move away. She didn't correct him. She didn't look around for me. She just stood there. Something went quiet inside my head. Not anger, not yet. More like clarity snapping into place. I walked toward them, slow, steady. Conversations dipped as I approached. People sensed something but didn't know what to do with it. Laura finally looked up and met my eyes. For a second, I thought she'd smile, or step back, or say my name. Instead, she froze. Richard glanced at me, amused, the kind of smile men wear when they think they're untouchable, when they think status is armor. "Everything okay?" he asked, still holding her. I didn't raise my voice, didn't clench my fists. I just looked at him. "Let go of my wife," I said. The word wife landed heavier than I expected. A few people shifted. Someone cleared their throat. Laura's face flushed, but not with relief. With discomfort, with something closer to annoyance. "Jake," she said softly, like I was the problem. "You're making this awkward." That was the moment. Not the hand, not the laughter, not even the words. That sentence. Richard chuckled. "Relax, man. This is business. You should enjoy the open bar." I nodded once, slowly. Because right then, standing under those lights with strangers pretending not to stare, I understood something I hadn't allowed myself to see before. This wasn't sudden. This wasn't a misunderstanding, and whatever this night was going to become, it wasn't going to end the way anyone expected. I stepped back, smiled faintly, and said nothing more. Silence can be unsettling when people expect noise. And that silence? It was just getting started. I stepped away from them without another word, not because I was defeated, but because I'd learned the hard way that the loudest moves are rarely the smartest ones. Around me, the gala slowly restarted. Conversations resumed in low tones. Laughter crept back in, cautious, curious. People were already rewriting what they'd seen into something more comfortable for themselves. I walked to the far side of the room and set my untouched drink down. My hands were steady. That surprised me. Inside, something had shifted, not exploded. Settled, like a door closing. From where I stood, I could still see Laura and Richard. He leaned in, said something into her ear. She nodded, smiled, not nervously, not apologetically, easily. Like this was familiar territory, like they'd rehearsed standing that close. I didn't interrupt. I watched. I noticed things I'd ignored before, how her body angled toward him, how she laughed just a second too late, how his hand returned to her back as if it had never left, and how no one, not a single person in that circle, objected. That's the thing about public humiliation. It doesn't need shouting. It only needs witnesses willing to stay quiet. A waiter passed by and asked if I wanted another drink. I shook my head. Alcohol dulls instincts. I needed mine sharp. I drifted through the room, nodding politely, exchanging meaningless pleasantries. Someone clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Your wife's killing it tonight." I smiled and thanked him. The words slid off me like rain on glass. Time moved strangely. Minutes stretched. Music blurred. I felt like an observer at my own life, finally seeing the set pieces instead of the story I'd told myself. When Laura eventually approached me, her smile was tight. "Why did you walk away?" she asked. "Because you didn't come with me," I replied. She sighed like I was exhausting. "You embarrassed me." I let that sit between us. Then I said, "He embarrassed us." Her eyes flicked toward Richard. "You don't understand how things work here." There it was again, that phrase, the shield she hid behind. "I understand enough," I said. She shook her head. "You always do this. You take things personally." I wanted to ask how long it had been going on. Wanted to ask how many nights she'd come home late with that same polished smile. Wanted to ask when I'd stopped being her partner and become an inconvenience. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "We'll talk later." Her relief was instant. Too instant, like she'd been afraid I might actually press. She turned back toward the crowd, toward him. I stayed where I was. Security guards stood near the exits, bored, scanning the room. The band switched songs. Applause rippled. Somewhere behind me, someone toasted to leadership and growth. And in that noise, something crystallized. This wasn't about love, or attraction, or even betrayal. Not yet. This was about power. About who thought they could take space that didn't belong to them. About who believed silence meant permission. I pulled my phone from my pocket and checked the time. Still early. Plenty of night left. Richard caught my eye from across the room. He raised his glass slightly. A challenge disguised as politeness. I didn't return it. Instead, I memorized everything. His posture. The way people deferred to him. The way Laura watched him when she thought no one noticed. The way the room bent subtly around his presence. You learn a lot when you stop reacting and start observing. When the applause died down again, Laura came back to me, closer this time. "Can we just get through tonight?" she asked. "Please." I studied her face. The woman I'd built a life with. The woman standing under chandeliers asking me to shrink. "Sure," I said, and I meant it. Because getting through the night didn't mean accepting it. It meant letting it reveal itself fully. She relaxed, looped her arm through mine like everything was fine, like nothing had cracked. I felt the weight of her hand on my sleeve and wondered how many times she'd practiced that gesture with someone else watching. As the band played on and the room buzzed, one thought settled in, calm and immovable. Some people mistake patience for weakness. They confuse quiet with surrender. And that misunderstanding? It always comes at a cost. The ride home was quiet in the way storms are quiet before they break. Laura stared out the passenger window, arms crossed, jaw tight. The city lights slid across the glass, illuminating her face in fragments. I kept my eyes on the road, not because I was afraid to look at her, but because I didn't trust what I might say if I did. Neither of us mentioned the gala. The garage door closed behind us with a dull echo. Inside the house, everything looked the same. Familiar. Safe. That made it worse, the illusion still standing. Laura kicked off her heels and placed them neatly by the door, a habit she'd always had. She moved through the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, drank it in one long swallow. "You didn't have to make a scene," she said finally, her back still to me. "I didn't," I replied. She turned. "You walked up like you were ready to start something." "No," I said calmly. "I walked up like your husband." That word again. It landed between us, heavy. She exhaled sharply. "You don't get it. Richard is, important." Important, not respectful, not appropriate, important. "And what am I?" I asked. She hesitated, just a fraction of a second, but I saw it. I always saw it now. "Jake, don't do this," she said. "I had a big night. I'm exhausted." I nodded. So am I. She brushed past me, heading upstairs. We'll talk tomorrow. I didn't follow. I sat at the kitchen table, long after her footsteps faded, staring at the reflection of the overhead light in the polished wood. I replayed the night frame by frame, not to torture myself, but to understand it. Patterns emerge when you stop making excuses for people. The late meetings, the sudden concern with appearances, the way she'd started guarding her phone like it contained state secrets, the way she talked about Richard, never too much, never too little. Always just enough. I stood, walked into the living room, and sat on the couch where we'd watched countless movies, argued about nothing, planned futures that now felt borrowed. On the side table lay her tablet, screen dark, unlocked. I didn't touch it, not yet, because what I needed wasn't suspicion. It was certainty. The next morning, Laura left early, earlier than usual. She kissed my cheek quickly, like checking off a task, and said she'd be late again. Big meetings, important people. I watched her drive away and felt something cold settle into place. I went to work, answered emails, sat through meetings, smiled when appropriate. No one there knew my life had cracked open the night before. That's the strange part about betrayal. It's invisible to everyone except the person carrying it. At lunch, my phone buzzed. A message from Laura. Long day already, dinner with clients, don't wait up, clients, plural, vague. I replied with a simple, okay. Then I did something I'd never done before. I paid attention. I checked the phone records, not messages, just timestamps, patterns, repeated late-night calls to the same number, always ending before she came home, always during meetings. I wrote the number down. That evening I didn't go home right away. I parked across the street from her office building, engine off, watching people stream out in clusters, laughing, complaining, free. An hour passed, then another. Finally I saw her. Laura exited the building, coat over her arm, phone to her ear. She smiled, the real smile this time, the one she hadn't used with me in weeks. A silver sedan pulled up. Richard stepped out, opened the door for her. She didn't hesitate. I didn't follow them. I didn't need to. The picture had finished forming. When I finally returned home, the house felt hollow, like it already knew. Laura came in close to midnight. She smelled like wine and unfamiliar cologne. She moved quietly, assuming I was asleep. I lay awake, eyes open in the dark, listening. That's when I understood something important. The truth doesn't always arrive with drama. Sometimes it slips in quietly, removes the last doubt, and leaves you alone with clarity. And clarity is dangerous, because once you have it, pretending becomes impossible. I rolled onto my side and stared at the wall. I wasn't angry yet, but I was done being blind. I woke up before dawn with my mind already moving. No rush, no panic, just a steady awareness that something fundamental had shifted, and there was no putting it back. Laura was still asleep when I got out of bed, her phone face down on the nightstand like it always was now. I didn't touch it. I didn't need to. The answers were no longer hiding. They were circling, waiting to be acknowledged. I showered, dressed, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table as the house slowly filled with morning light. Every object felt different, like it belonged to a previous version of my life. When Laura finally came downstairs, she acted normal. Too normal. She talked about traffic, about deadlines, about how stressful things were at work. I listened without interrupting, watching how easily the words came. When she left, I waited a full minute before moving. Then I opened the tablet. No password. She'd never thought she needed one. The screen lit up with messages still open from the night before. Not work, not clients. Richard, familiar tone, intimate, casual in a way that only comes with repetition. I didn't read everything. I didn't need to. Dates, times, places, enough to confirm what my instincts had already locked onto. I took photos of the screen with my phone, careful, methodical. Then I checked the shared calendar. Meetings that didn't exist, trips that were never booked, gaps that told a clearer story than words ever could. I closed the tablet and set it back exactly where it had been. No confrontation. Not yet. That day, I moved through the world like a man everyone underestimated. I went to work, I nodded, I smiled, I answered questions. And all the while, I paid attention. Who talked to whom? Who avoided which topics? Who assumed I was still in the dark? That evening, Laura texted again. Late night. Don't wait up. I didn't reply. Instead, I went home and opened a folder on my computer. I organized what I had. Photos, records, notes. Nothing dramatic. Just facts lined up neatly. Around 10, I heard her car in the driveway. She came in humming softly, stopped when she saw me sitting in the living room. "You're up," she said. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. She nodded, set her bag down, and started toward the stairs. "We need to talk," I said, not raising my voice. She froze for a second, then turned with a tired smile. "Can it wait?" "No," I said. She sighed, sat across from me, already defensive. I didn't accuse, I didn't raise evidence. I asked one simple question. "How long have you been lying to me?" Her reaction told me everything. Not shock, not confusion, calculation. She tried to redirect, to minimize, to explain how complicated things were. I let her talk. Silence is powerful when someone expects resistance. When she finished, I said, "I know about you and Richard." Her face changed. She didn't deny it. She asked how much I knew. That told me more than any confession. "Enough," I said. She started crying then, but it felt rehearsed, like something she'd practiced in her head for when this moment came. She talked about pressure, about ambition, about how nothing was as simple as I thought. I listened, calm, distant. When she reached for my hand, I pulled back. "I'm not yelling," I said. "I'm not begging. I'm just paying attention now." She looked at me like she was seeing a stranger. Maybe she was. That night, I slept on the couch. Not out of spite, but because some distances are necessary. In the quiet, staring at the ceiling, I understood the real turning point hadn't been the gala or the messages or even the lies. It was the moment I stopped needing her to explain herself, when I stopped asking why. Because once you stop asking why, you start deciding what comes next. And that decision was already forming, solid and unavoidable, even if I hadn't said it out loud yet. The morning after that conversation felt strangely clean. No shouting, no slammed doors. Just a quiet understanding that something irreversible had already happened. Laura moved around the house carefully, like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. She tried small talk. I didn't engage, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. When someone shows you who they are, conversation becomes unnecessary. I left the house with a folder under my arm. Inside were copies, dates, messages, simple facts, not revenge, insurance. I drove straight to a law office downtown, the kind with frosted glass and neutral colors, meant to keep emotions contained. The attorney, Karen, listened without interrupting. She didn't react to the story, only to the evidence. That's when I knew I was doing the right thing. People who deal in truth don't need drama. By noon, the paperwork was started. That afternoon, I did one more thing. I went online, found Laura's company ethics page, and read it slowly. Every rule, every policy, every consequence spelled out in plain language. Then I submitted a report, calm, factual, documented. No adjectives, no opinions, just a timeline that spoke for itself. When I clicked submit, I didn't feel triumph. I felt finished. Laura found out faster than I expected. She called, texted, then showed up at the house, eyes red, voice shaking. "You're destroying my life," she said. "Not our life. Hers." "You made choices," I replied. "I'm just not protecting them anymore." She talked about love, about history, about forgiveness. I listened until she ran out of words. Then I said, "When someone disrespected me in public, you stood with him. That's all I needed to know." She didn't argue after that. The fallout came quickly. Meetings, investigations, quiet removals from company systems. Richard disappeared first, Laura followed. No dramatic exits, just erased access and unanswered emails. Power vanishes fast when it's built on silence. The divorce moved forward without theatrics. Assets split, papers signed, the house sold. I took what was fair and left the rest behind. Freedom weighs less than furniture. Months passed. My life shrank in the best way. Smaller space, fewer obligations, mornings without suspicion, evenings without excuses. I started sleeping better, thinking clearer. I wasn't angry anymore. Anger requires attachment. One evening, I ran into someone from Laura's old company at a bar. He mentioned layoffs, restructuring, names that used to carry weight and now didn't. He asked about Laura. I shrugged. She's not part of my life. And that was the truth. The last time I saw her was by accident, across a grocery store aisle. She looked older, tired. When our eyes met, she hesitated, like she wanted to say something. I nodded once and kept walking. Some conversations end without words. People ask if I regret staying quiet that night at the gala, if I wish I'd yelled, made a scene, thrown punches. No, because silence let me see everything clearly. Silence let them reveal themselves. Silence gave me time to choose the outcome instead of reacting to the moment. I learned something important through all of this. Strength doesn't announce itself. It waits, it watches, and when it moves, it doesn't need permission. If this story hit close to home, if you believe respect still matters, do me a favor, subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Your support keeps these stories alive. And remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the only one who really knows what's coming next.